June 1945. The war in Europe is over, and trains carry the defeated across a strange, sprawling land they've only known from propaganda posters, America. Among the captured are German women from auxiliary units and support services, disarmed and exhausted, shuttled under guard to a temporary camp under the southern sun. They expect suspicion, rationed bread, a hard gaze from every face. Instead, as the train slows and the heat rises, the wind carries a smell they cannot place. Smoke, sweet and earthy, like burning orchards. And then, something richer. Meat, slow-cooked somewhere beyond the rail yard, the scent floating in the summer air like a rumor. They don't know the word for it yet, not exactly, but it will be the first word they learn by heart. Barbecue. They step off the train, blinking against the bright light. The women are quiet. Liesel, who once taught school. Marta, who could wrench loose a stuck bolt faster than most men in the motor pool. Annalisa, who kept the unit's ledgers with fast, precise hands. Ruth, who is younger than she pretends to be. Their uniforms are faded, insignia removed, boots dusty. They carry the exhaustion of a world unmoored. A guard calls for order. An interpreter, an American with a thick Midwestern accent, gentle and brisk, relays simple instructions. Stand here. You'll be processed. There will be food. The word food lands strangely. No one knows what food means here. What it means after years of scarcity and substitutes, and a calendar lined with hunger. There is a gate ahead, a fence, and beyond it, shaded benches and a low building with a roof of corrugated tin. The smoke comes from just out of sight, around a corner, as if it were something carefully tended and hidden. Perhaps that concealment is part of the ritual. You don't just see barbecue, you search for it by scent. He is not the first American they've seen, but he will be the first they remember. Sergeant James Carter. He's from somewhere the map calls East Texas. He speaks slowly, like he's got all day. He learned a few German phrases from a friend, plus a handful of words from a pocket guide. It's enough. He nods a welcome, awkward but sincere. He gestures toward a squat brick pit behind the mess building, a steel lid propped with a crowbar. The smoke writhes up, blue and thin in the heat. Barbecue, he says, tapping the lid with the back of a spoon. He opens the pit with a grunt. The women lean without meaning to. Inside, large cuts of meat, brushed with a deep, glossy glaze. Racks and rings and slabs whose names they do not yet know. Peckenwood snaps. The heat is real but not scalding. The smell is powerful in a way that feels generous instead of aggressive. The word barbecue rolls strangely in German mouths. Barbecue. The interpreter repeats it in both languages until it seems like a simple thing to say. They line up. A table has been set with practical American abundance. Sliced bread, pickles, onions, a pot of beans sweetened with molasses, a pan of something golden, cornbread that crumbles the moment it's touched. There are pitchers of tea, half filled with ice that tinkles like glass when poured. On another table, the breath-fogged bottles the women recognize from rumor. Coca-Cola, beaded and dark, labels an impossible red. Somewhere, a crate of ice cream is being navigated from shade to shade. An everyday miracle stored in dry ice. It is not a feast. The war's shadow is long in every country. But it feels like one. It feels defiant. A meal slow-cooked while the world burned. Marta, second in line, watches the blade cut through a thick slab of meat. The knife slides, the surface shines, and there, just under the bark of spice and smoke, is a pink color she has never seen in cooked meat before. Later she will learn the phrase, smoke ring. For now, it looks like a border between what she expected and what she finds. No one moves at first. They hold their trays, uncertain. There are guards, yes, rifles slung, eyes scanning without menace. But there are also volunteers, American women in summer dresses and sensible shoes, paper hats tilted to block the sun. They smile with a hesitance that mirrors the Germans' own. A Red Cross worker, a chalkboard sign listing the day's fare, a pot of sauce with a ladle. The interpreter says, "Try." It is safe. He searches for a word that means more than safe. He picks good and shrugs. Very good. Ruth takes a bite. The crust breaks with a tiny resistance, and beneath it, the meat gives, tender and warm. There is pepper, and a sweetness that isn't sugar but something older. There is a whispered bitterness like coffee that she loves more than she will admit to anyone. There is smoke that tastes like someone kept watch for hours, not rushing, because they trusted time would reward them. She closes her eyes. Something in her loosens. Across from her, Liselle takes a sip of Coca-Cola. The fizz races across her tongue. It is strange and childish and delightful all at once. She laughs in spite of herself. An American girl, hair tied back with a ribbon the color of tomatoes, laughs with her. They both stop, surprised to find they have laughed in the same language without words. Propaganda, they were taught, is a solid fortress. It tells you what to fear. It gives you slogans to protect you from complexity. But propaganda is brittle. It breaks in the presence of small, stubborn realities. The sound of ice clinking in a glass, the smell of meat cooked slowly without hurry, the way a stranger says your name and gets it almost right. "Where are you from?" the American volunteer asks, the interpreter echoing in careful German. "Dortmund," says Anneliese. "Berlin," says Liselle. "Near Kassel," says Marta. Her family has a garden with apple trees. She mentions this without realizing why. Maybe because the smoke smells like those trees in autumn when the prunings smolder. "You'll get seconds," says Sergeant Carter, pointing at the plates. "After the first round." He hasn't learned the German words for those phrases yet, so he pantomimes, holding up 2 fingers, smiling as if to say, "Trust me." They do. War is hunger. War is the substitution of the modern for the edible. Coffee that isn't coffee. Meat stretched with bread. Bread stretched with hope. In letters home, they wrote about recipes that didn't exist and meals they imagined. Their hands remember the weight of a slice of bread as if that weight were the measure of the world's fairness. Now, sitting at a wooden table that creaks like a porch step, they eat slowly, first from suspicion of their own appetite, then from gratitude. The beans sing with molasses. The cornbread is a puzzle, both firm and fragile, like old paper that still holds a story. The sauce, a thin, tangy red, touches the corner of Liselle's mouth. She wipes it away, shy and smiling. Along the fence line, a radio buzzes, a baseball game in progress. The words float beyond their vocabulary, but the rhythm is clear. A ritual of call and response, like a hymn or an argument with rules. Another voice hums a tune that sounds familiar, even if they've never heard it before. The melody of a place certain enough to celebrate the slow cooking of meat in the middle of a complicated world. The American women did not come as judges. Most are volunteers from nearby towns. Some have brothers overseas. Some lost someone. Grief and grace sit uneasily together, but they sit together all the same. The German women did not come for friendship. They arrived in uniforms that are now stripped of their edges and meanings. And yet, sitting over plates of barbecue, they exchange the smallest of things. A napkin passed without request. A lesson in pronouncing pecan. A nod at the mention of children. "Do you have?" the volunteer asks, miming cradling a baby. "No," says Marta. She shakes her head, then stops and adds, "Not yet." It comes out more hopeful than she intended. A breeze lifts the paper cups, scatters napkins. Someone reaches to pin them with spoons. Someone else laughs. The tender hum of an everyday mess fills the yard, a relief after years of rigid order. After the second helpings, while the smoke thins and the afternoon leans toward its hottest hour, there is time for words. The interpreter moves from table to table like a bridge, translating the small questions that carry large meaning. "What is this cut?" Annalisa asks, pointing to the thick, tender slices. "Brisket," says the sergeant. He taps the side of his chest, the lower breast, and shrugs. "Cow. Chest." He says it in English, then tries in German, and everyone smiles at the effort. "And this?" Ruth points to a coil of sausage, pepper flecks under the skin. "Links," he says. "Sausage, garlic, pepper." It becomes a lesson in nouns and adjectives. Smoke, sweet, tangy, tender. Words you can taste. Words that can be shared. Later, too, they will learn other words that matter in this place. Fairness, oath, neighbor, democracy. They will learn that those words are lived more than said. They will also learn that they are sometimes betrayed. But today, the nouns belong to the table. The verbs are simple: to slice, to share, to eat. This is not a story about paradise. The women sleep in barracks with cots and thin mattresses. The days are scheduled. There are guards, roll calls, inspections. Work details will be arranged. Laundry and mending. Sometimes agricultural work under supervision. Letters in and out are censored. The fence is real, and it is there for a reason. And yet, inside that fence, the rules of humanity are not suspended. At mealtimes, the Geneva Convention is more than a document. It shows up as a warm plate, a second helping of beans, a glass of tea poured to the brim. The sergeant keeps a notebook, who prefers no sauce, who takes extra pickles, who favors the sausage over the sliced meat. He pretends it's for supply counts, a joke everyone recognizes. Some nights, the volunteers bring books. Sometimes a nurse visits and advises on a cough that won't resolve, a wound scar that aches. There is a chaplain who speaks gently and doesn't pry. There is a bulletin board with announcements written in both languages, thumbtacks punctuating the thin paper like little suns. Music finds its way in. It always does. On the second weekend, after the barbecue pit's lid has been lowered and the last bright threads of smoke disappear, a young corporal pulls out a harmonica. An American girl sways with a paper cup of lemonade. A German woman hums a melody she learned before the war. A love song that doesn't name the beloved because it doesn't need to. "We can try together," the volunteer suggests, the interpreter filling in the space between them. They find a tune both sides know. Lily Marlene, standing under a lantern, and then, shyly, the American offers, "You Are My Sunshine." The song is simple, the chords gentle. The German voices find the melody's shape. It's not a retreat from the truth. It's an honest search for a sound they can share without lying to themselves about what has happened. The fence remains. The rifles remain. But for 3 minutes and 15 seconds, the air belongs to everyone. In the days that follow, the women speak of home. They don't say much at first. The words feel like foreign currency. They're not sure they can spend without losing something. But gradually, in the cool of morning and the soft mess hall chatter, phrases emerge. "My mother had a patch of mint by the door," says Liselle. "My father was a baker," says Annalisa. "He used to tap his finger on the countertop when he wanted me to hurry." She taps the table twice, and the sound hangs between them like a small ghost, familiar and not unkind. "Apples," Marta says again, laughing at herself. "I talk about them too much. I think about them too much." Every path through the garden felt like a decision that mattered. They ask about America. The volunteers' answers are unglamorous and precise. A church bake sale, a neighbor who talks too loud, long roads with nothing on them but a gas station that smells like oil and pie, a porch with a swing, a town with fewer secrets than it thinks. They don't pretend everything is perfect. They tell the truth in the way ordinary people tell it. Unadorned. Barbecue is patience. Sergeant Carter says this more with his posture than his words. He arrives before dawn to feed the fire. He resists the temptation to raise the heat, to rush. Low and slow, he says, an article of faith. The women learn to measure time the same way, not in hours, but in stages. The first week is confusion, new words, new tasks, new faces. The second week is prediction. Knowing when the tea arrives, who will ration the butter precisely, which guard will nod more than he speaks. The third week is acceptance, the understanding that the body can rest even in confinement, that the heart can keep a ledger of kindnesses without erasing the entries of pain. On Saturdays, the pit is lit again and the smoke rises. The volunteers bring corn from a nearby farm. The beans simmer with strips of bacon. If supplies are thin, the menu shrinks, but the generosity does not. A meal is a promise. We will not lose ourselves. Not every woman eats. Some hold back, not from hunger, but from sorrow. A plate of abundance can feel like an accusation when you don't know if your family has eaten in days. Annalisa folds her napkin until the edges meet like arms crossing. She stares at the food as if it were a test she might fail. The volunteer doesn't press. She sits across from her and places her own fork down. "Tell me about him," she says, guessing at a fiancé or brother or father. The interpreter waits. Patient, Annalise speaks. She doesn't say everything. She says enough. The barbecue cools in the afternoon heat. When she finally eats, her face is set. A decision made. Later, she will admit that the first bite tasted like forgiveness for something she has not yet forgiven herself for. Food cannot heal a country, but it can open a door in a day. On an ordinary Tuesday, Liselle writes home. The pencil is short. The eraser is hardened. She holds her hand above the paper as if warming it. "We are fed," she writes, simple and unadorned. They cook meat slowly over wood. It tastes like smoke and pepper. I drank something with bubbles that made me laugh. She stops, embarrassed by her own joy. She adds, "Do not worry." She does not know if the letter will arrive or when. She writes it anyway. Hope is the same everywhere. A message placed on the river and trusted to the current. The women take pride in work even now. In the laundry, they form a rhythm that is almost music. Soak, scrub, wring, hang. They repair uniforms with stitches small and careful. In a garden plot by the fence, they tend onions. Watch the green shoots rise. An American supervisor shows Marta a method for tightening a loose hinge without stripping the screw. He compliments her competence. She nods as if it were nothing, then carries the sentence like a pebble in her pocket, a reassuring weight for later. At mealtime, they line up again. The pit releases its breath. A new cook appears one week, a man from Kansas, and he brings a different sauce, thicker, sweeter. They debate, learning another American ritual. Argument without malice about things that do not wound. "Texas," says Sergeant Carter, gesturing at the thin, peppery sauce. "Kansas City," says the new man, tapping the thick glaze with pride. The women laugh. Choice is a luxury. Debate is a luxury. They luxuriate in it, quietly. Weeks become a braid of small moments. A guard trading a harmonica for a carved wooden bird. A volunteer teaching a word that doesn't fit neatly in German. A sudden rainfall that sends everyone scrambling with plates held aloft, laughing as if they were running from a shared prank. On the day the first cool morning arrives, September, perhaps, you can see your breath for a second before the pit's smoke swallows it. The women wrap their hands around tin cups of coffee, that is, finally, coffee again. The sergeant cuts the brisket a little thicker to keep its heat. He sets a slice on Ruth's plate and says her name without mangling it. "Thank you," she says in English. She grips the word like a handhold and does not let go. The war is over. But the war is not over. News arrives slowly. Each headline is a stone that skips, then sinks. There are trials elsewhere and other camps, Other fences. Here, the routine holds. On Sundays, a shorter shift. On Saturdays, smoke. The women build strategies for surviving this suspended time. Learn a new word each day. Press flowers between pages of a borrowed book. Write down a recipe if someone shares one, even if you cannot make it now. Annalisa writes down the barbecue sauce she thinks she might remember. Vinegar, pepper, a little mustard, salt, a pinch of sugar. It is not the real recipe. It is the gesture that keeps her steady. One day, maybe, she will build a fire safely tended and wait for heat to become tenderness again. One day, she will feed someone she loves and watch their eyes close the way hers did in that first bite. It does not happen with fanfare. The orders arrive. The women will be moved again, closer to the harbor, then home when home is ready. They gather their belongings, the sum of what they can carry, which is less than what they have gained. The volunteers fold the tablecloths. The sergeant cleans the pit with a thoroughness that looks like prayer. There is a last meal. The smoke is a little thicker, as if reluctant. The slices are a little more generous. No one says last. They say again, as if promising the day something it cannot keep. Liesel takes a final sip of sweet tea and lets the ice clink against the tin, a small sound she will later hear in dreams. Kindness tapping lightly to announce itself. Remember, says Sergeant Carter, finding the words. Low and slow, she nods. It means more than cooking now. It is how you rebuild a life. Years later, on a market day, in a city that has changed its face 3 times, Marta will stand at a stall where a butcher offers something smoked. The smell will lift her back across the ocean. She will buy too much. She will wrap it in paper and carry it like a talisman. She will invite her neighbors and say, in a voice that does not tremble, I will try to make something I tasted once, far away. Annalisa will open a drawer and find a faded card with a recipe and guessed at measurements. She will laugh at herself and try it anyway, adding pepper with a boldness that startles her. Liselle will pour soda for a child who giggles at the bubbles, and she will close her eyes, just for a second, to feel the way the sweetness ran across her tongue that first day. Ruth will hum a song that learned a new language in its chorus and feel her throat loosen as if decades were nothing. The world will argue about big things, and it should. But somewhere, there will be a backyard with a grill and a fire managed with patience, and someone will say, taste this, which is another way to say, let me show you how I learned to trust time again. Barbecue did not end the war. It did not rebuild a city or rewrite a law, but for a handful of hours each week, it offered a counter-argument to despair. Slow heat, shared plates, honest labor, a ritual for ordinary people who needed to remember what generosity felt like. The first taste surprised German women who arrived expecting only suspicion. The second taste taught them they were seen. The third taste made a promise they carried home, that even after the worst, there are ways to feed the living that honor the simple truth we forget at our peril. People can be better than the flags they march under, and food can be the first sentence in a language that reminds us, low and slow, slice and share, eat and remember.